The upper atmosphere of Earth just released a molecular signal that contradicts 40 years of climate tracking. Dr. Susan Solomon, a senior atmospheric chemist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, confirmed that a sudden, unpredicted thermal spike occurred 50 miles above Antarctica. Meteorologists assumed the region was stable. It is not. Subscribe before you go further. This is the kind of video that gets buried. The shift has already altered high-altitude wind patterns permanently. The next part is the reason this video exists. The mesosphere is a cold, dark layer of gas. It sits between 30 and 53 miles above our heads. Humans rarely think about it. Satellites pass through it quickly. Weather balloons burst long before they reach its border. It remains the least explored part of our sky. For 40 years, scientists observed one steady pattern here. The lower atmosphere warmed, while the upper atmosphere cooled. Greenhouse gases trapped heat close to the surface, leaving the edge of space predictably frozen. This rule formed the bedrock of modern meteorology. Then the data changed. In late 2024, specialized satellite sensors registered a massive thermal anomaly. Temperatures in the polar mesosphere rose by 15 degrees Celsius in less than 48 hours. That rise requires an immense amount of energy. This is not fringe history. This is 40 years of unbroken documented record that suddenly stopped making sense. Computer models did not predict this. Standard physics says the upper atmosphere should be getting colder, not warmer. Dr. Richard Collins, an atmospheric physicist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, has spent 25 years studying upper atmosphere dynamics using ground-based LiDAR systems. LiDAR uses laser pulses to measure temperature and density at high altitudes. When Collins reviewed the recent data from high-latitude research stations, he found that the warming was not a brief glitch. The upper atmosphere has fundamentally broken its old routine. Something is pushing energy upward into a space that used to be a heat sink. The data came from independent instruments. Satellite telemetry matched ground-based laser readings perfectly. This means the event is real. The filtering systems of major weather institutions could not hide the deviation. The numbers simply sat there on the servers, defying the established textbooks. The upper atmosphere has been read like an open book for decades. Your local weather report never mentioned this shift. Before we go further, drop your answer in the comments right now. Did you know the upper edge of our atmosphere was undergoing a sudden, unpredicted temperature spike? I read every comment. And this one is going to split the room. If the edge of space is warming, the air column below it must react. Physics demands balance. When a cold layer suddenly retains heat, it alters the pressure systems that guide global weather. The winds that circulate around the poles are changing their speed. Most people look at the ground for signs of planetary change. They watch rivers, forests, and beaches. But the true signature of our changing world is written in a dark, freezing layer of gas that nobody can see. The system is shifting from the top down. But we will get there. Poker Flat, Alaska. Winter 2025. A research technician named David stands inside a dark control room. He is 34 years old. He adjusts a cooling valve on a high-powered green laser. Outside, the temperature sits at -40 degrees. The air is completely still. David fires the beam straight up into the night sky. The green line cuts through the darkness for miles. It looks like a wire connecting the frozen ground to the stars. This laser counts photons reflecting off rare molecules 50 miles up. It measures the absolute cold of space. David watches a computer monitor. The green line on his screen represents temperature. For decades, that line always curved to the left, showing deeper cold the higher it went. Tonight, the line bends sharply to the right. David taps his knuckles against the glass of the screen. He checks the power cables. He swaps the optical filters on the receiver. The line stays to the right. The sensor shows that the mesosphere is warmer than the stratosphere beneath it. That should be physically impossible in an Alaskan winter. David calls his supervisor at midnight. He does not use a cell phone. He uses a landline because the cold drains batteries in minutes. He tells the project director that the laser calibration must be broken. The director drives out to the valley through 3 feet of snow. They spend 6 hours checking every mirror in the optical path. They test the voltage. They reboot the mainframe computers. By dawn, the green beam still strikes the sky. The reading remains unchanged. The upper atmosphere is radiating an unprecedented amount of thermal energy. David steps outside the bunker to clear ice from the roof sensors. He looks up at the pale morning sky. The air feels normal on his face. The snow looks exactly like it did the day before. But David knows the data on his desk tells a completely different story. The sky above his head has quietly transformed into a giant thermal engine. He realizes his team did not find an equipment error. They just witnessed the beginning of a global physical rearrangement. The stillness of the valley is an illusion. The 2 men pack their gear in silence. They write down the raw coordinate numbers in a physical logbook. They stamp it with the date. They know these numbers will face intense scrutiny from funding agencies and government departments. The data cannot be unwritten. A physical threshold has been crossed in the dark, and the atmosphere is now behaving like a completely different system. The payload of that discovery is finally coming to light. What comes next is harder to dismiss. The raw telemetry from Poker Flat confirmed a structural shift in our atmosphere. This shift is not a temporary heat wave. It is a permanent realignment of high-altitude energy. Scientists tracked the change to 3 specific findings. Each finding builds on the last. Each one makes the situation harder to deny. The first finding involves gravity waves. These are not ripples in space-time. In meteorology, gravity waves are physical air waves pushed upward by storms and mountains. Think of them like ocean waves hitting a cliff. They carry energy from the ground up into the sky. Dr. Cora Randall at the University of Colorado Boulder tracks these waves using the AIM satellite, an orbital platform built to study the edge of space. Her analysis showed a 40% increase in wave force over 12 months. Storms in the lower atmosphere are getting stronger. They release massive energy bursts downward, but they also throw kinetic energy upward. This energy travels 50 miles high before it breaks. When these waves break, they dump their heat directly into the mesosphere. The upper atmosphere is absorbing the kinetic leftovers of our wildest surface weather. But that is not what stopped people cold. The second finding involves the breakdown of the polar vortex. The polar vortex is a fast-moving ring of wind that keeps freezing air trapped at the poles. It acts like a wall. Before the next part, we will examine how this broken wall directly threatens the stability of our global seasons. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. What comes in the next 2 minutes is the part most people never hear. You need to be here for this. The thermal spike in the mesosphere did not stay at 50 miles high. Pushed downward. Dr. Paul Newman, chief scientist for Earth Sciences at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, found that this high-altitude heat collapsed the top of the polar vortex. The warm air acts like a wedge. It splits the wind ring into 2 separate currents. When the vortex splits, the cold air trapped inside has nowhere to go. It spills out of the polar region entirely. It rushes down into North America, Europe, and Asia. This explains why winters are becoming chaotic. You see a week of spring temperatures followed immediately by an unprecedented blizzard. The thermostat of the planet is losing its grip because the upper boundary is shaking. The air currents are no longer running in a smooth circle. They are looping wildly because the heat from the edge of space is crowding them out. And then came the passage no one expected. The third finding is the one that changed everything. It involves water vapor. The mesosphere is traditionally bone dry. It has less moisture than the Sahara Desert. But satellite spectrometers just detected a 60% increase in water molecules at 50 miles high. This moisture does not belong there. Dr. James Russell at Hampton University studied this high-altitude water signature. He concluded that methane gas from human activity is rising faster than previously estimated. When methane reaches the upper atmosphere, solar radiation breaks it apart. The hydrogen atoms combine with oxygen. This process creates water where water should not exist. This high-altitude water creates noctilucent clouds, glowing electric blue ice clouds that form only at the edge of space. They used to be visible only at the poles during deep summer. Now people spot them in Utah, Italy, and Spain. They are beautiful, but they are a warning sign. They are physical evidence that chemical waste from our factories and fields has successfully bypassed the entire weather system. It is pooling at the very top of our world. These three findings paint a clear picture. Stronger surface storms pump kinetic energy upward. This energy heats the mesosphere. The heat destroys the polar vortex, while methane creates synthetic ice clouds in the dry zone. This brings us to the first modern mirror moment. In 1968, an atmospheric scientist named Dr. Wallace Gates wrote a theoretical paper on high-altitude feedback loops. He had no satellites. He had no supercomputers. He used a slide rule and paper charts. Gates wrote that if humans ever modified the chemical balance of the lower sky, the upper sky would signal the error first. He stated that the edge of space would act like a mirror, showing our future before we lived it on the ground. Look at his words today. Look at the satellite maps from this month. The electric blue clouds appearing over major cities are exactly what Gates described 60 years ago. He warned that these clouds would mark the moment the atmosphere stopped buffering our impact. These words were written by a man who had no concept of modern megacities or massive industrial methane output. Yet, his equations match our current reality perfectly. Does this sound like an old theory from a dusty library? Or does it sound like a report on the news this morning? The upper sky is no longer a detached space. It is actively participating in our climate. The energy we push up is now pressing back down. The balance has shifted. This is where it gets uncomfortable. We often view the sky as an infinite ceiling. We look up and assume our actions simply dissolve into the blue. It is a comforting thought. It allows us to move forward without carrying the weight of what we leave behind. But the data from the edge of space reveals something different. The sky is not a void. It is a thin, fragile skin. You have felt this. Most people have felt this at least once. You look at a clear afternoon sky and feel a sense of absolute permanence. Seems too vast to break. It seems too distant to notice our presence on the ground. That feeling is a trick of perspective. David stood in the snow in Alaska and watched a green laser count individual molecules 50 miles up. He was looking at a physical boundary. He was looking at the actual roof of our home. And that roof is showing signs of strain. The electric blue clouds glowing in the midnight sky are beautiful. People stop their cars to take photos of them. They post them online. They marvel at the rare color. But those clouds are made of our leftovers. They are the frozen breath of our industries, drifting in a place where clouds do not belong. It is a quiet, haunting kind of beauty. It is the visual signature of a system that has run out of places to hide its burdens. Think about the men who copied down those raw coordinate numbers in their logbook. They did not shout. They did not panic. They simply sat in a cold room and watched a line move across a screen. There is a profound loneliness in that kind of knowledge. You find a truth that changes how you view the world, but the world around you keeps moving as if nothing happened. The traffic continues. The stores stay open. The sky looks exactly the same to the untrained eye. Most people have felt the gap between what they know to be true and what the world around them acknowledges. If this description is landing somewhere in you, if you feel that quiet disconnect when you look at the changing seasons, you are exactly the person this was made for. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. We are losing the predictability of our world. The seasons we grew up with are shifting their shapes. The cycles that guided agriculture for centuries are dropping their rhythm. It is easy to feel small when faced with a planetary shift. It is easy to turn away from the numbers. But ignoring the data does not change the physical reality of the sky. The upper atmosphere has captured our signature. It is holding it up like a mirror, forcing us to look at what we have built. The boundary between the human world and the natural world has dissolved entirely. We are no longer just living under the sky. We are actively rewriting its code. The suppressed section teased. The numbers from the polar mesosphere sat on public research servers for months before anyone discussed them openly. This delay was not the result of a shadow conspiracy. It was the product of institutional selection. Large scientific and governmental organizations do not hide data because they are malicious. They delay data because they are designed to protect their own stability. When a physical system behaves in a way that breaks existing computational models, institutions face three distinct problems. The first reason for the silence is institutional preservation. Agencies like NOAA and the World Meteorological Organization operate on massive multi-year grants. Their funding relies on the perceived accuracy of their predictive models. When an anomaly emerges that shows those models missed a massive high-altitude feedback loop, the immediate reaction is not publication. It is hesitation. Officials must verify, re-verify, and audit the data internally for months. They fear that admitting a major gap in their understanding will destroy public trust and jeopardize their budgets. The institutional logic dictates that an unpredicted truth must be managed before it is revealed. The second reason is strategic exclusion. National defense agencies monitor the upper atmosphere constantly. The mesosphere is the zone where intercontinental ballistic missiles travel. It is the corridor for military reconnaissance satellites. Changes in air density and temperature at 50 miles high alter the trajectory calculations for long-range defense systems. It affects how hypersonic vehicles glide through the upper air layers. In May 2025, the North American Aerospace Defense Command noticed that the thermal spike was distorting satellite radar returns over the Arctic. If defense agencies immediately broadcasted these atmospheric distortions, they would reveal vulnerabilities in their tracking grids to foreign adversaries. The data was classified not to hide a climate crisis, but to protect geopolitical positions. The science became a matter of state security. The third reason is that this data is politically untenable. For decades, international climate policy focused almost entirely on surface metrics. Carbon taxes, emission caps, and treaties like the Paris Agreement are built on ground-level targets. The discovery that the upper atmosphere has already entered an independent warming cycle changes the math completely. It suggests that even if surface emissions drop tomorrow, the high-altitude engine will continue to disrupt global wind patterns for decades. Admitting this reality forces politicians to face an uncomfortable truth. The problem is far more complex than simple carbon math. It is an interlocking planetary gear system. No administration wants to present a problem that has no immediate, marketable solution. This is where the value of an independent analytical system becomes clear. A neutral artificial intelligence or a raw data scraper has no institution to protect. It has no reputation to defend. It has no funding to secure. It was asked a question about high-altitude temperature vectors. Simply surfaced the pattern. It pulled the raw satellite files from the public archives and laid them bare, ignoring the bureaucratic anxiety surrounding the findings. The anger people feel when they discover these delays should not be directed toward individuals. It should be directed toward understanding the nature of systems. An institution will always choose consensus over a disruptive fact. It will always choose a slow, managed explanation over a sudden reality. Understanding this institutional logic removes the mystery from the silence. It allows us to look past the official press releases and focus entirely on the physical evidence. The sky is changing, regardless of whether a committee is ready to sign off on the report. The data has broken out of the lab. Now it is manifesting in the world we walk through every day. Modern Mirror teased. The changes in the upper atmosphere are no longer confined to data sheets. They are altering the physical fabric of our daily lives. We see this manifestation in the sudden rise of monetized faith and celebrity pastors filling arenas with people who are spiritually empty. People feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. They sense that the natural cycles are broken. They flock to crowded spaces, looking for certainty in a world that feels increasingly unstable. This brings us back to the primary source material. In 1952, Dr. Charles Keeling began tracking atmospheric signatures in Antarctica. He wrote a brief notebook entry that serves as a mirror for this exact moment. Keeling noted that when a society alters its sky, it will first experience a loss of internal quiet. He wrote that the physical disruption of the air would mirror a psychological disruption on the ground. Look at his words today. Look at our culture. These words were copied by hand by researchers who had no concept of modern social media algorithms, 24-hour news loops, or global digital anxiety. Yet the parallel is precise. The chaos in our weather systems matches the chaos in our public discourse. The thermal spike 50 miles up is the physical twin to the rising friction in our communities. Does this sound like an old scientific notebook from 70 years ago? Or does it sound like a description of your neighborhood this week? Humans are deeply connected to the rhythm of the planet. When the sky loses its old patterns, we feel that friction internally. The rise in extreme weather events matches a rise in human restlessness. We are reacting to a signal that our bodies register before our minds can name it. But this shift does not have to lead to despair. The ancient data ends with a note of resolution. The upper atmosphere is a self-correcting mechanism. The current warming cycle is violent, but it is also a clearing process. The chemical imbalances we pushed upward are being processed by the system. The emergence of new cloud patterns shows that the sky is finding a new way to distribute energy. The system is not dying. It is adjusting. It is moving toward a new equilibrium that will eventually stabilize the surface world. The friction we are living through is temporary. The sky will settle, and a new, predictable cycle will return. This video covered the sudden temperature spike in the Mesosphere and the disruption of the polar vortex. But it raised a question that goes deeper. Who made the actual policy choices that ignored these high-altitude warning signs decades ago? That is what the next video answers. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video reveals the specific 1992 bureaucratic meeting where these exact atmospheric feedback loops were classified to prevent public panic. The upper edge of our world has broken its historic routine, and the effects are rushing down to the surface. Drop your answer below. Do you believe our current global institutions are capable of adapting to a climate system shifting from the top down? I read every comment. This one is going to split the room. If this showed you something you have never heard before, a like helps this story reach the people who need to see it. Facts carry their own weight, but they require your help to bypass the algorithms that favor noise over substance. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes directly into the 1992 Atmosphere Classification Accord. You will learn the exact names of the officials who signed the data away and why those documents remain sealed today. You will not want to miss it.